Those peculiar bipeds from Earth had done it again. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps watched in collective bewilderment as human warships thundered across space-time, breaking at least 16 different peace treaties and probably a few laws of physics along the way. They do realize those aren't even their people, right? Ambassador Zixtal's crystalline form refracted light in patterns that indicated severe confusion. Their species communicated through light patterns, and right now they were practically broadcasting their bafflement in disco ball fashion. The situation had started, as most galactic incidents involving humans tended to, with someone being an absolute dimwit. The Kraxixi Empire, notorious for their might makes right philosophy, had decided to flex their tentacles at a developing civilization in the Orion Spur. Standard procedure for most spacefaring races would have been to file a complaint with the Galactic Council, schedule a meeting for the next century or so, and perhaps send a strongly worded message via quantum entanglement. But humans? Oh no. The moment they'd picked up the distress signals, their entire diplomatic corps had transformed from peaceful representatives into what they called righteous fury incarnate. The sight of their ambassador slamming a fist on the ancient quantum marble conference table while declaring, "This ends now," had caused several photosynthetic species to wilt in shock. Their behavioral patterns defy all logical matrices, noted High Counselor Vexu, their tentacles twirling in mathematical equations of frustration. They expend resources, risk lives, and destabilize established political frameworks for beings they've never met. The Council's massive holographic display showed the human fleet approaching the Kraxixi blockade. The humans had named their flagship Humanity's Conscience, which many species found redundant. After all, wasn't conscience supposed to prevent conflict rather than charge headlong into it? Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Thorell, their cybernetic eyes whirring as they processed the data, we should review their historical records again. There must be some evolutionary advantage to this. What do they call it? They call it doing the right thing, grumbled Ambassador Zixtal, their crystalline surface now showing patterns that translated roughly to extreme exasperation with human nonsense. The Council's artificial intelligence pulled up hundreds of human historical records, each showing the same baffling pattern. Humans fighting for slaves they'd never met, humans defending countries they'd never visited, humans risking everything for principles that didn't even directly affect them. They appear to have a cognitive virus, declared one of the silicon-based intelligences from the Andromeda Galaxy. It spreads through what they call inspiration and moral obligation, most troubling. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of protests, suggestions, and philosophical debates. Some argued for quarantine, others for study, and a few brave souls suggested that maybe, just maybe, the humans were onto something. Order! The Grand Arbiter's voice resonated through the quantum-linked chambers. We must address the immediate situation. The humans have already launched what they call a humanitarian intervention. On the display, the human fleet had taken up defensive positions around the developing civilization's planet. Their communications officer was broadcasting on all frequencies. This is your first and final warning. Stand down, or we will demonstrate why picking on the little guy is a really bad idea. The Kraxixi response was predictably arrogant. This is not your concern, humans. These beings are weak. Their resources are desirable. This is the natural order. The human commander's laugh that followed sent chills through various appendages across the council chamber. Natural order. Let us tell you about our natural order. We evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill us. We survived by helping each other, by standing together. And now? Now we stand for everyone who needs standing for. Fascinating, mumbled a quantum physicist from the Hive Mind Collective. They've weaponized their trauma into a form of universal empathy, most inefficient, yet somehow elegant. The council watched as the human fleet demonstrated exactly why their species had earned the reputation of being aggressively helpful. Their ships moved with precision that belied their reputation for chaos, their strategies showing that famous human contradiction of controlled fury. "I believe," said Ambassador Thorell, their cybernetic systems struggling to process the scenario, "we are about to witness why humans have survived despite their seemingly self-destructive altruism." The Galactic Council settled in to observe, many recording devices active, all trying to understand the peculiar species that had evolved to turn compassion into a force more powerful than self-interest. As the human fleet engaged, one truth became universally clear. They weren't just fighting for strangers, they were fighting for an idea that would soon shake the very foundations of galactic society. The real question wasn't why humans went to war for strangers. The question was, how had the rest of the galaxy evolved so long without learning to do the same? Across the quantum-linked feeds of the Galactic News Network, footage of the Craxixi atrocities began streaming in. The images hit the galactic community like a supernova to the face. Refugee ships shot down, civilian centers bombarded, and an entire civilization being systematically stripped of both resources and dignity. The human response was, as one particularly astute hive mind observer noted, like watching a supernova of righteous anger, but with better targeting systems. Within 12 standard hours, humanity had mobilized a response that made their previous show of force look like a diplomatic tea party. Ships emerged from hyperspace like angry wasps from a disturbed nest, their hulls bearing names that perfectly encapsulated the human psyche: unconditional aid, swift justice, and perhaps most terrifyingly, we're here to help. They named a dreadnought-class warship, "We're here to help." Ambassador Zixtal's crystalline surface flickered with what could only be described as a geometric facepalm. The linguistic dissonance alone could tear a hole in space-time. The human fleet's primary command ship broadcast a message that would later be studied in xenopsychology courses across the galaxy. To all civilizations watching, this isn't about politics, this isn't about resources, this is about basic decency. And if we have to teach that lesson one plasma torpedo at a time, so be it. The Galactic Council's emergency session was a chaos of translators trying to keep up with the multilingual outcry. The logical collective of Beta Centauri demanded a cost-benefit analysis. The empathy hive of Proxima demanded emotional impact reports. The Silicon Consensus demanded everyone shut up and watch the humans do their thing. Their neural patterns during these interventions are fascinating, reported Dr. Sai Zhen, the Council's chief xenoneurologist. Their pleasure centers activate when helping others. They've literally evolved to get high on altruism. "So they're pleasure-seeking missiles of morality?" questioned a baffled energy being from the Carina Nebula. "That's terrifyingly efficient." The Craxi, meanwhile, were learning several important lessons about human warfare. First, humans didn't fight like a proper military species should. They didn't follow the established rules of engagement, preferring instead to invent new ones on the spot. Second, they had an annoying habit of protecting evacuation ships with the same ferocity most species reserved for their home planets. "Their battle formations make no tactical sense," complained a Craxi commander shortly before their ship's systems were completely rewired by what humans called a happiness virus, a piece of code that forced all ship systems to play something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" on infinite loop. The human approach to space combat proved to be as contradictory as everything else about them. They combined cutting-edge technology with what they called old-school tactics, like using their advanced gravity manipulators to recreate something they nostalgically referred to as dropping anvils on cartoon characters. The Galactic Council's strategic AI had a minor breakdown trying to analyze human battle tactics. "They're simultaneously following and breaking every known rule of warfare," it reported before requesting a vacation. But it was the ground operations that really showcased human complexity. While their ships engaged in space, human aid workers were already planetside, setting up refugee camps, medical stations, and, in a move that confused every species present, something called therapy puppies. They brought juvenile canines into a war zone. The logical collective's representative was practically short-circuiting. For emotional support? The efficiency is actually quite remarkable, noted a military observer from the hive worlds. The psychological impact of these good boys appears to reduce trauma by approximately 47.3%. The humans had also deployed their infamous humanitarian aid packages, containers filled with such a bizarre mix of practical and comfort items that several alien species assumed they must be coded messages, who includes emergency rations, medical supplies, and something called chocolate in the same package. As the situation escalated, the Galactic Council received a formal explanation from the human diplomatic corps. It was 3 words long: because it's right. When pressed for a more detailed explanation, the humans sent back a video compilation of their historical figures: Gandhi, Mandela, Malala, people who had fought for others' freedom. The message was clear. This wasn't new behavior for them. This was who they had always been. They're not going to stop, are they? Ambassador Thorell's cybernetic systems had finally processed enough data to reach a conclusion. This isn't just warfare, this is evolution in action. The Kraxi made their final mistake when they attempted to use civilian settlements as shields. The human response was immediate and evolved into what they called precision righteous fury, surgical strikes that somehow managed to disable enemy weapons while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. How do they maintain such control while being so emotionally invested? Wondered the Silicon Consensus. It defies all logical parameters. The answer came from an unexpected source, a human medical worker treating both wounded civilians and captured Kraxi soldiers with equal care. When asked why, they simply shrugged and said, "Because that's what humans do. We get angry, we fight like hell, but we never forget why we're fighting in the first place." As the second phase of this interstellar drama unfolded, the galaxy watched in fascination as humanity demonstrated that being a warrior species and a caring species weren't mutually exclusive. They had somehow turned compassion into a tactical advantage, empathy into a weapon, and moral outrage into a force that could reshape planetary systems. The Galactic Council's observation logs for that day contained a note that would become famous. Perhaps the truly advanced civilizations are not those who learn to suppress their emotions, but those who learn to channel them into universal progress. The humans, naturally, had a simpler way of putting it. Sometimes you just need to punch a bully in the face and then help them up afterward. That's called civilization. The thing about humans, as the galaxy was rapidly learning, was their uncanny ability to turn compassion into a precision-guided missile of justice. Their military campaign against the Kraxi unfolded like a masterclass in what they called aggressive peacekeeping. "They're using capital ships as orbital shields," reported a bewildered tactical observer. "They're literally parking their most expensive vessels in the line of fire to protect civilian populations they've never met." The human fleet's battle strategy defied every known military doctrine. They divided their forces into what they called the Hammer and the Hug, one group engaging the Kraxi while the other conducted rescue operations. Their command structure had officially designated these as Operation Throwdown and Operation Tender Loving Care, causing several military analysts to require immediate medication. "Their battlefield communications are equally perplexing," noted a signals intelligence specialist. "They alternate between precise tactical terminology and something they call trash talk." Indeed, The humans had turned psychological warfare into an art form. They broadcast their intentions openly, telling the Kraxxi exactly what they were going to do, and then, in a move that frustrated every military strategist in the galaxy, did exactly that, but with a level of effectiveness that shouldn't have been possible with telegraphed moves. "We're about to demonstrate why you don't mess with the little guys," announced one human commander. "Pro tip: when we say we're coming in hot, we mean that literally." They proceeded to use their ship's heat shields to create a protective barrier of plasma around a refugee convoy. The Kraxski's attempts to understand human battle doctrine led to several hilarious misunderstandings. When humans announced they were dropping the bass, the Kraxxi prepared for some sort of aquatic weapon. Instead, they were hit with sound frequencies that turned their neural networks into the equivalent of a galactic rave party. But it was the ground operations that truly showcased human complexity. They deployed what they called combat medics, soldiers who would shoot at you with stunning precision one moment and patch you up the next. This concept was so foreign that several species filed formal complaints about the cognitive dissonance it caused. They're using combat algorithms based on dance moves? The tactical AI monitoring the situation needed 3 reboots to process this information. Human ships moved in patterns that resembled something called breakdancing, making them nearly impossible to target while maintaining formation integrity. The humans had also introduced something they called tactical kindness, psychological warfare through aggressive acts of compassion. They would disable enemy ships and then immediately send repair crews to fix life support systems. They fought with one hand while offering medical supplies with the other. "It's not just warfare," realized Ambassador Zixtal, their crystalline surface showing patterns of dawning comprehension. "It's education through demonstration." The Kraxxi leadership, facing this unprecedented combination of military might and moral conviction, began showing signs of something humans called getting a clue. Their troops reported confusion at being treated with respect after surrender, at receiving medical care from the same forces that had disabled their ships. Ground forces moved through contested zones with what they called controlled chaos, a military doctrine that seemed to consist of equal parts strategic brilliance and improvised madness. They would set up defensive positions that doubled as aid stations, turning military strongholds into community centers. "They're not just winning the battle," observed High Counselor Vekshu. "They're rewriting the rules of engagement." The turning point came during what would later be known as the Mercy Offensive. When the Kraxxi deployed their final defensive line around their command center, the humans responded with what they called overwhelming kindness. They launched an attack that disabled weapons systems while simultaneously broadcasting instructions for surrender and promises of fair treatment. "Your weapons are disabled, your shields are down, and we've got hot chocolate and medical supplies ready," announced the human commander. "Let's talk about why picking on peaceful species is bad for everyone's health." The Galactic Council watched in amazement as human forces systematically dismantled the Kraxxi military while setting up rehabilitation programs for the defeated forces. They had somehow turned battlefield victory into a teaching moment about galactic citizenship. "They're treating war like a particularly aggressive form of social work," commented one observer, their tentacles twitching in bewilderment. The humans had even deployed what they called cultural understanding units, teams specifically trained to explain human concepts like basic decency and standing up for others in terms other species could understand. They were conducting warfare and cultural exchange simultaneously. As the Kraxxi resistance crumbled, the humans demonstrated perhaps their most baffling characteristic, the ability to switch from righteous fury to compassionate reconstruction without missing a beat. Their warships transformed into aid vessels, their soldiers into peacekeepers and teachers. "We need to update our definition of advanced civilization," suggested Ambassador Thorell. "Any species that can turn warfare into a force for positive social change clearly operates on a different level." The galaxy watched as humanity demonstrated that true strength wasn't just about military might or technological advancement. It was about knowing when to fight, how to fight, and most importantly, why to fight. The humans have won more than a military victory, observed the Grand Arbiter. They've provided a practical demonstration of their philosophical principles. As the dust settled and the human fleet began transitioning from combat to humanitarian operations, one truth became clear. They hadn't just defeated an enemy, they had transformed an entire sector's understanding of conflict resolution. The Craxi commander's final transmission to their high command summed it up perfectly. We didn't just lose a war, we got schooled in galactic citizenship by a species that combines hugs and high explosives. In the aftermath of what became known as the compassionate intervention, the galaxy faced an uncomfortable revelation. Humans hadn't just won a war, they'd sparked an evolutionary leap in interstellar ethics. The Galactic Council chamber, usually a bastion of careful diplomatic maneuvering, had transformed into something resembling a philosophical crisis center. Species that had evolved over millions of years to suppress emotional responses found themselves experiencing what humans called feelings. It was messy, confusing, and surprisingly productive. Let me get this straight. A quantum-based consciousness flickered in bewilderment. They fight wars for strangers because they can't not fight them, because it hurts them to watch others suffer. Precisely, responded Ambassador Thorell, their cybernetic systems finally calibrated to process human emotional logic. They've weaponized empathy, and now they've infected us with it. The evidence was everywhere. The Craxi, those notorious aggressors, had undergone what humans termed a come-to-Jesus moment, though nobody quite understood what a Jesus was or why anyone would go to it. Their entire society was reorganizing itself around concepts like, maybe we shouldn't be jerks, and helping others actually feels pretty good. The human diplomatic corps, watching this transformation, maintained what they called a straight face, a feat considering how obviously pleased they were. They had submitted only one official document to explain their actions, titled Being Decent 101, A Beginner's Guide to Not Being a Space Jerk. Their infection spreads, reported the Silicon Consensus, with something approaching awe. Species across 3 sectors are implementing what they call random acts of kindness. The chaos is organized. The Hive Mind Collective had started a galaxy-wide initiative called Project Understanding, which basically involved asking, what would humans do before making any major decisions? The results were causing diplomatic tsunamis across known space. Even the energy beings of the Carina Nebula, famous for their detachment from physical realm concerns, had begun manifesting what they called solidarity wavelengths with developing civilizations. We've been examining their historical records more closely, presented Dr. Zai Zhen to the Council. Their entire history is a cycle of fighting against oppression, not just their own, but anyone's. They're essentially hardwired to throw hands with bullies. The Galactic Council's emergency session had stretched into its 4th day. Half the representatives were experiencing emotional breakthroughs, while the other half were trying to develop immune responses to human-style empathy. Neither group was succeeding. Their method of warfare defies evolutionary logic, argued a representative from the Logical Collective. They expend resources protecting the weak, risk population units for non-tribal members, and then share resources with defeated opponents. And yet, countered Ambassador Zixtal, their crystalline surface showing complex patterns of understanding, they've survived and thrived. Perhaps our logic needs updating. The human response to all this philosophical turmoil was predictably practical. They established what they called empathy training centers across the galaxy, basically crash courses in caring about others. Their curriculum included such revolutionary concepts as everyone matters and being strong means protecting the weak. The most profound impact came from their rehabilitation program for the Craxi. Instead of punishment, humans implemented what they called restorative justice. The Craxi were required to help rebuild what they had destroyed, but with human mentors showing them how to, as they put it, be better. They're not just teaching us to fight differently, realized the Grand Arbiter. They're teaching us to think differently. The effects rippled through galactic society. Species that had evolved through competition began exploring cooperation. Ancient enemies found themselves engaging in what humans called talking it out. The economy shifted as societies began valuing ethical behavior alongside profit. We're receiving reports of spontaneous outbreaks of altruism in previously aggressive species, announced the Galactic News Network. The human condition appears to be contagious. The final report to the Galactic Council contained a section that would be debated for centuries. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their military might or their technological advancement, it's their fundamental inability to witness suffering without trying to stop it. As the galaxy absorbed this lesson, something unprecedented happened. Species began voluntarily joining what humans called the Good Guy Club, an informal alliance of civilizations committed to protecting the weak and standing against bullies. The human ambassador, watching all this unfold, simply smiled and said, "Welcome to the family." In the end, the galaxy's question about why humans go to war for strangers was answered not with words, but with results. Half the galaxy did cry, but they were what humans called happy tears, a concept that required 63 different xenobiologists to explain. The official archives of the Galactic Council added a new section titled Human Paradox Theory, which stated, "The most advanced form of evolution may not be the ability to suppress emotion, but the capacity to feel deeply while thinking clearly, to fight fiercely while loving unconditionally." As for the humans, they just kept doing what they'd always done, charging headlong into other people's problems, fighting battles that weren't theirs, and somehow making the galaxy a better place through sheer stubborn insistence that everyone deserves a chance at peace. A final notation in the council records summed it up perfectly. Perhaps the question was wrong from the start. We shouldn't have asked why humans go to war for strangers. We should have asked why the rest of us didn't. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a small ship from a newly spacefaring race sent out a distress signal. Before anyone could blink, a human vessel appeared, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Don't worry, we've got your back. That's just what humans do." The galaxy watched, learned, and finally understood. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't logic or strength or advanced technology. Sometimes it's just the simple, unshakable conviction that helping others is the right thing to do. And that, as humans would say, is that.